Okay, so the recording starts.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the North Sydney Local Planning Panel. This afternoon we have some 12 items that we will be making a determination on. And just to outline briefly the process, we ask for any objectors or the representatives to address the panel first, and then we ask the applicant and his or her representatives to address those issues that may have been raised and answer any questions that the panel may have. We've inspected all the sites today and we are a panel of 4, as you can see. I'll ask each one of them to introduce themselves, and you can be assured that we've all filled out a conflict of interest form, and I'll ask each member to confirm that as well. I'm Jan Morell and I've been a planner for too many years, and I've been in local, state government and private consultancy, and my last full-time position was Commissioner with the Land and Environment Court for 14 years, and now I sit on local planning panels as either chair or an expert witness. I have no conflicts of interest, and I'll call on Ken Robinson to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Ken Robinson. I'm a community representative on the panel. I'm a resident of North Sydney. I was an environmental scientist and planner for over 30 years, and I have no conflicts of interest.
Jared Teresi, I'm a town planner, got 37 years of experience as a planner, both at local government and in private, and basically I've no conflicts of interest.
Thank you. And
my name's Ian Pickles. I'm a town planner of over 45 years experience in both private sector and for local government, and I have no conflict of interest in any of the matters.
very well. And we will now commence with item 1, and this is 184 Carrabba Road, Carrabba Point. And we have a number of people listed to address the panel from the community, and we also have the applicant and representatives as well. So I'll just run through that list to begin with. And if I can preface it before you do make your submissions, normally we don't on this panel have a strict time limit, but given the number of matters and the number of submitters that will be discussed today, then I will be letting you know after 3 minutes. And if you could please keep your advice to us as brief as possible, bearing in mind we have read the submissions, so we understand where people also live and their concerns that they have with the application. The first, I'll just do a roll call. I have Simon Smith there.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Alison McCabe.
Just Alison's caught in a court matter at the moment, so it'll just be myself from SJB Planning.
Okay then, thank you. Rod and Ros Hills. Yes, thank you. John Diddams.
Yep.
Thank you. David Rami. No.
No, it doesn't look like he's there.
Okay. Ross Gardner. No. Okay. And for the applicant, I have Thomas Berrigy.
Yep.
Thank you. And I have Jason Perica.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. Very well.
Excuse me, my name hasn't been called, but I'm supposed to be on that list.
And your name? Sorry, who's speaking?
Randon.
Observing
and speaking. I sent an email back to Holly.
Brandon, is it Brandon Illick?
Yep.
Okay, we've got you observing, so that's fine. We can add you to
The list. Okay. Thank you, Randon. Rightio, very well. So could I bearing in mind that we've had a site inspection today, and just so that you're all aware as well, we went into the property next door that is being completed, 182, I believe that must be 182.
Yes.
And so we had a look at the proposed development and understanding what the impacts would be. So we have done that as well. So Simon Smith, please.
Thank you, panel chair. I work for SJB Planning and prepared 2 submissions on behalf of 2 unit owners at 182 to the northwest. So that's GO1 and one of the upper level units 201. I was the author of an original submission in October, and then I also wrote an additional submission that was submitted on Monday.
Yes.
Just confirming the panel.
Yes, we do have all the submissions. Yes, including that one from Monday. Yes.
Great, thank you. Yeah, appreciate the application has gone through some amendments relative to some of our concerns originally October. That was regarding preparation of a view impact analysis and some additional information relative to a height plane. But as per the latest updated submission, we still have concerns regarding the proposal. So you would have seen when you're on site today at 182, yeah, there's a right of way which is situated between the 2 properties. One of our concerns relates to an additional turning bay parking area. Mainly, I think off the top of my head, it's 1.8 meters set back from the adjoining property boundary. It's not actually addressed within the assessment. As you know, it's tricky regarding levels on both sites, but if you're looking at the DCP, technically it would need a 2.5 meter setback. So there's concerns of its projection, and that's best called up in some of the view impact analysis, which provided a bit of a 3-dimensional viewpoint. So within my submission on Monday, there was a photo taken from the lower ground unit balcony. You can see within that photo that there's a vehicle that was parked on the existing driveway. So there's concerns that it actually may practically end up as an additional car space and therefore have some impacts in terms of privacy, headlights, etc. So that was one thing that hopefully was apparent today at the site visit. Next, in terms of privacy itself, there was a condition recommended in the officer's report regarding the upper level balcony. It was restricting the area of the balcony to 18 square meters. So if the proposal was deemed to be supported, we were requesting that it doesn't extend beyond the northernmost wall. Panel members would probably note my original markup, which just explained that, but we felt the condition itself needed strengthening in terms of that to mitigate impacts. And just back on the turning bay itself, if the panels were to support it, we recommended some conditions regarding screening and noting that it wouldn't be used for parking itself. In terms of bulk and scale, yeah, the original application had 2 calculations for building height. There's a lot of planners in the room, so it's always a tricky one, but Merman, in terms of known levels, better in terms of the interpolation. The recent building that's newly constructed that went through a panel process and an appeal process over the last 12 months, we used existing ground levels in regard to impacts and calculations of height. So whilst there is a reference to that in the documentation, the height plane, for example, has not been modelled in that form. It's just modelled on the lower height exceedance. So when that's extrapolated through to the view impact analysis, in my eyes, it's not showing the full degree of non-compliance or impacts from that. So in my markup, we were kind of looking at the uppermost level in bathroom 2, and that extends to the south. So there is view impacts from that, and the documentation and the support for it is not consistent with what happened previously through the courts at the adjoining site.
Okay, can I just say, Simon, that's 3 minutes, but I'll allow you, you're representing two
Okay.
people, but you can,
Yes.
you don't need to use your full 3 minutes, bearing in mind that we've read all the documentation. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So just through that, whilst there's also the non-compliance, there's the story height control, or story height as viewed from the foreshore. So there was an image that we provided from the foreshore that really it will read as 5 buildings, which is not consistent with heights for low density dwellings. So that was exacerbated. And then when you have undersized floor to ceiling heights, the uppermost level was 2.47. There's also concern that in order to get that compliance, that the actual height would have to increase overall. The last part was just to mention was regarding construction related conditions. If the proposal was deemed to be supported, we noted about the right of way, and yeah, there's a concern that during construction, vehicles may restrict this right of way, which is also relied on for secondary access and fire. So once again, if the development was to be supported, we recommended conditions in that regard.
Right, thank you very much, Simon.
And that was a...
Thank you. Any questions from the panel?
No.
No, very well. If I can just say at this point, if the panel does have questions of any submitters, if they could just let me know as opposed to having to ask you each time.
No.
Thank you. Okay, so let's now move to Alison. Oh, Alison's not here, so we understand that you're representing GO1 as well, Mr. Smith, and 201.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Thank you very much. So Rod and Ros Hills. Thank you. Rosalind, I can see you on the screen.
You're on mute.
You're on
You're
mute. Thank you. You're still on
Are
mute.
you still on mute? Yeah.
Yep. Have I unmuted and you can hear me?
Yes,
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So I'm very new to this sort of business and this type of thing. So I appreciate your patience and I will read it so that for brevity, it will make it very interesting. I was under the impression that I might have other professionals speak ahead of me, but I'm sure you'll hear the professional point of views because I support those views. I have only 3 major concerns with this application. The first one is obviously the size and the bulk of the building. Again, has been suggested by SJB, the 5-storey development clearly shows in the plan is not conducive to the area, nor does it meet the council requirements. I believe you hold many reports from these professionals and objectors in that development, and I'm just going to leave that it violates a lot of council requirements for the application. And that on that point alone, I think it should be refused. The second point I just want to say is landscaping plans are very unclear due to the bulk of the building and the increased number of concrete pathways that are around the house. Substantial trees and lawns have been removed. Added to this construction of this large oversized turning bay, again, SJB's pointed it out, removing more substantial, I think they said 6 healthy trees and lawn, and be replaced by a concrete car parking lot, which will be used. This turning bay and the concrete upturns and the bridges to the house, around the house, add to the bulk and to the development. And I think at least the sides should be at least glass and to reduce that oppressive dominating look of that building. And the final point that I have is that I don't believe there has really been much time given to for us to view these amended plans. It concerns me that there was not adequate notice to advertise these changes. And as the process for this application appears to me to be excessively quicker than the average application process to council, based on my research and evidence that I have, as well as that the fact that the development breaches so many council requirements of height and bulk and landscaping and view loss. It concerns me, and it would be a shame that in dealing with this application, the parties involved would leave themselves open to allegations of favouritism and coercion and abuse of power. I'm worried about this, and I know that this type of approach of coercion and power play has been happening all too often, and certainly leads to unnecessary stress and anxiety upon one's mental health and well-being. That is a big concern for me. I seek this application to be refused based on the meeting that the legal stipulations for the residential building in the area, or at least postponed till New Year, so that correct advertising can occur and that these issues raised today, and from the reports being addressed online with council requirements and codes to the satisfaction of those who are concerned with the application proceeding as it stands. That's it.
Thank you, Rosalind, and you've just got just over 3 minutes, so that's very well, very well done.
I'm a public speaker, it works.
Okay, and John Diddams. Is Rodney Hills going to speak as well? You're on mute, Rodney.
Yes, Rodney was going to speak. Let me find out about it.
Is there?
Yeah.
Can I just say to you, Rodney, unless there's something different you have to say to what has already been.
Yes, I understand how the process works, Madam Chairman. I had 2 points, one which was to do with the right-of-way, which I believe SJB has covered adequately, the restriction of bikes and motorbikes. He's referred to that. My second issue is that of Sydney Harbour. The panel would agree that it's one of the finest harbours in the world. The independent planner, Mr. Swan, has not considered fully the impact from the water or the other side of Shell Cove Bay. Mr. Swan makes the comment that the site is highly visible from Cremorne Point Coastal Walkway. It makes no comment about the additional view from the harbour or the coastal walkway. As SJB said, they've submitted photographs that clearly show at the present time the building is viewed as a four-storey building and would not meet the objectives of the R2 low density. Mr. Swan, in his report, correctly states one objective, and I appreciate there's multiple objectives, of the R2 zone is to maintain a built form of mainly 1 and 2 storey in the R2 low density zone. This is 2.5 times that. I request the matter be referred back to the applicant to delete the new top level that is not in keeping with the low density zone and views from the public walkway. Thank you for your considerations, and hopefully by approving this, we won't create a 5-storey building that will affect the harbour for a lifetime. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rodney. Now I'll call upon John Diddams.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm a neighbour. My principal concern over the DA's proposed use of the shared driveway for the construction project. I'm sure you're aware that the driveway to 184 off Carrabba Road is a shared driveway for the unfettered use of 9 separate residences at 182, 184, 184A and 184B Carrabba Road. And as such, it's in constant use by the residents. So to use that driveway to do major earthworks for 184 and have heavy trucks using it will severely impact on amenity and safety of all the other users and neighbours. Further, that the shared driveway is quite narrow. It's very steep. I'm sure if you've been there today, you would have seen it yourselves. It's very steep. There's no turning area at the bottom. So heavy trucks using it will either have to reverse down and then come up forward, or go down frontwards and reverse up, which is even more dangerous, with poor visibility due to the steepness. In either case, it will be very dangerous for many other driveway users and pedestrians and could result in serious accidents or injury, even death. The applicant herself, who I note is a North Sydney councillor, is on record at the council for having objected to the use of the driveway for trucks used in the construction of the building works at 182 Carrabba Road on several occasions. And those people, that builder, only used the very top portion, not the full extent of the driveway down 184. So the applicant itself understands the dangers that are involved in using this driveway. I'll add to that, the driveway is in very poor condition after works that were undertaken by the owners of 184 to relocate all their water, electricity and other services down the centre of it. So it's in a number of different features and surfaces. To use heavy trucks on that will no doubt see it deteriorate further, perhaps to the point where it become unusable for others. I further add that parking in Carrabba Road is very restricted for cars, much less large trucks, and if they're waiting to go up and down the driveway, and the large trucks required for the proposed demolition, excavation and building construction. So there's no on-site parking at 184. So I don't know where these trucks are going to go. Now, I looked at the conditions of the development approval that were published, I think 2 days before this meeting, which didn't really give us much time to study the 44 pages of the development approval. But among other things, it calls for a construction management program, including a dedicated temporary construction site driveway entrances and exits, controlled by a traffic controller to safely manage the pedestrians and construction-related vehicles in the frontage roadways and footways. Now, this is clearly impractical and quite frankly impossible to comply with. There's only one way in and out of 184, and that's a single lane shared driveway. So how they can dedicate a temporary construction site driveway entrance and exit is beyond me. But I'd stand corrected if someone could help me. It also called for turning areas within the site for construction spoil removal vehicles, allowing for forward egress for all construction vehicles on the site, which again, an inspection on the site would deem this impossible to comply with, as there's no turning area for a car, let alone a truck, at the bottom near the construction site. I submit that the conditions of the development approval are fatally flawed, and the site should be inspected again to assess a more suitable alternatives for the construction management program. To this end, I note that the property at 184 also has waterfront access, so I suggest this should be utilised as a much safer and amenable alternative for all demolition, excavation and construction works, rather than using the difficult and dangerous shared driveway under the current flawed plan. I have a number of other comments, but I will leave those to others. This is my principal concern, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, John. David Rami. He's not there.
Yeah, he has his.
He's joined us.
Yep.
He has.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yes, I'm having trouble with my camera, so I apologise for that.
Yes, okay.
Okay, look, I'm the owner of Geo1 in 182.
Yes.
Carrabba Point. Look at the end of the day, I've got no problem with and putting this DA in and taking advantage of the rules and regulations that apply. But my main concern is the extension of the driveway. That affects me greatly, and I was very disappointed that they didn't consult or try to show some consideration for that, because it affects my privacy on my rear balcony, which comes directly off our living area. So it's only outdoor area at that level, and think that it would very much impact our privacy and our use of that balcony, as well as being acoustically, noise, etc., coming off any vehicles that were down there. I'm suspicious that they may end up using that as I probably would not want to see it being used as a parking area down there, definitely. I think that's really the main issues that I have, as well as the driveway use itself, because it is our fire escape, that shared driveway, and it is the place where we park our bicycles and motorbikes as well. So I think that any traffic management plan that was submitted to the council would really need to consult with all the users. As John Didham said, there's 9 users of that driveway, so it would really need to have some input from those 9 users. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now can I ask Mr. Ross Gardner, are you there? I don't believe he's joined us. No, Ross Gardner's not there?
No.
Very well. And there are no other people who wish to make a submission on this matter apart from the applicant and the applicant's planner?
No, I'm still waiting to be addressed, to have the opportunity to address.
Brandon.
Who's that? Oh, sorry, yes, Mr. Randon Illick. Thank you.
Okay, I'm speaking on behalf of 184B Carrabba Road as a director of one of the owners. Also as on 186 Carrabba Road as an attorney for Kathleen Illich, the owner, and 190 Carrabba Road as the owner. Did the panel inspect the proposed development from the viewpoint of 184B, 186 or 190?
Well, yes, we walked around the area and we went into the relevant. Well, as I said, we went into 182, but we looked at all of the properties along there in Carrabba Road.
But they're all garages at the front there, so you couldn't have any idea what was going on unless you actually went into those properties, stood on the balconies, looked across and saw the impact. So I don't know why the panel didn't make arrangements to inspect from the viewpoint of those 3 properties, because they're 3 neighbouring properties.
Well,
equal to 182.
Yeah, can I just say, we do have all the documentation that's been provided by consultants of objectors as well as the applicant town planner as well. And the normal course of events is, and I know this probably won't assist you, but if people ask for us to view from their properties, they actually make that request. But we certainly spent time in that street to understand what the impacts of the development and down the roadway, understand the impact of the development as well. But please, if you can continue your submission, that would be appreciated.
Okay, but just for the record, I don't think that's adequate. So if I've got a requirement to arrange access, then that should have been advised to me, but I had no idea that I am meant to do that proactively. But I'll proceed. So I just wanted on the record that I object to the fact that no one actually viewed the properties, the proposed development on any of those 3 properties. So my concerns are those already mentioned, but to briefly run through them, the views to the north from 186 are affected by the scale of the development. The height is going even higher, causing shadowing on 186, especially our balcony on the northern side and our balcony on the eastern side, and also this is on 2 levels, and also our clothesline where we hang clothing on that side, on the northern side. Shading is therefore an issue. Story height is an issue for bulk and scale because it's out of character with the area, and viewed from the harbour, as mentioned earlier, is also, I believe, to be excessive, grossly excessive. The building is already huge and it already occupies a footprint of concrete and brick that is it's greater than practically any other property along that line there. I also have concerns. I wasn't quite sure with the drawings. It seemed to me that the building was being pushed beyond the foreshore building line, but that's something that needs to be addressed. The height plane is also something that I don't believe has been compliant. Landscaping is also an issue that I've also believe that there's landscaping that's inadequate. It's already a large footprint building. It shouldn't be will give rise to the loss of further trees. As to access of 184B. I share the concerns on the driveway. Again, earlier comments apply to us as well. It's a one-way in and only have to back out. And there's a lot of traffic going backwards and forwards there. And I also think that there's any demolition that should go out through the waterfront. And in every other respect, I just don't think that it complies. I think the haste with which this has been handled is extraordinary. We have a DA that was, when you compare the average turnaround time for a DA, especially something on the harbour foreshore, especially something of this height, bulk and scale, for this to be rushed through at the pace that it is, I'm really surprised. And I just don't understand how it's possible that it's this fast when every other applicant seems to be struggling along to be compliant. So that's my comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Now I'll turn to the
So can I just say, sorry, we do have Ross Gardner here.
Ross Gardner.
Is
I
he-
believe you've joined us now.
Can you hear us, Ross? He's calling in on a mobile, so I don't know.
You there, Ross Gardner?
He's here, but yeah, he's not. No.
No, okay. We've given you the opportunity, but if you come on the line, we'll interpose you. I will now turn to the applicant and the applicant's planner, Jason Perica.
Thanks, Madam.
Yep.
Madam Chair and panel members. What I might just do is run through the points that were raised in order and provide a brief response. I know you've got a big day. First, on the right of way that was brought up a number of times. I think it's important to point out that in no way does the DA seek to or can it derogate from any legal rights that currently exist. I think one of the important aspects is to try and improve the turning area so that vehicles from the subject property can leave in a forward direction and enter in a forward direction. I think ultimately that'll help the functioning of the right of way for all those concerned. I do hear what the neighbours saying about the slight extension to help that manoeuvrability in and out from the property. I didn't see the most recent submission, and screening I think is something that could be looked at, but it's important to note in terms of any concerns about light spill or privacy, the garage isn't being altered nor the levels of the driveway other than an extension to facilitate forward movement. In terms of construction impacts, as mentioned, all legal rights will exist and be maintained. There is a plan for a construction management plan by condition that's fairly typical, and that will be complied with. But the summary there is, I think it's a positive aspect of the proposal. Yes, construction impacts are always temporary and there is some impact, but they will be managed within legal rights and as best as possible. In terms of privacy in the balcony, we see the condition recommending the reduction in size to 18 square metres. You'll note that that's essentially shielded from the by the building itself or by the top extension itself. The condition requiring a reduction in size to 18 square metres, we don't raise any concern with. In terms of the height, the comments about Merman and Batar, we noticed the adjoining DA and for an excavated site used the Batar approach, but it hasn't been a case of choosing one and ignoring the other, as in the clause 4.6. Both approaches have been outlined in the clause 4.6 and the plans that were lodged. Details provided on both, and the clause 4.6 has considered both, but taken the view that in this case, because of the excavation, that the Batar approach is more appropriate, and that's been the case used in other developments. In terms of the stories, we agree with the assessment in the report, and I could probably pull any of the concern about the harbour impacts. It does step up the hill. That's not uncommon for steeply sloping sites. And the height of the proposed extension matches the height of the roof. Yes, it's a flat roof, but so are most of the buildings around it. And I think that helps overall to reduce the impacts on neighbours. The height is 1 centimetre lower than the existing ridge and about 100 to 200 millimetres lower than the adjoining property to the south. In terms of the harbour impacts, I think you'll see from the photo montage in the assessment report that it is in the foreground of buildings behind it to a 12-metre height limit. Yes, you will see it if you're looking for it, but it won't impact the silhouette of the peninsula or be out of scale with the surrounding buildings. That's our position. I think that's a position concluded by the independent assessment. In terms of the size and bulk, yes, there's a height non-compliance. The The proposal, the plans, and the revised clause 4.6 does outline, and as outlined in the report as well, the original proposal and the considerable changes that were made post that submission to address the view concerns principally from the neighbours. We contend that those view impacts are now non-existent or negligible, but for clarity, both the original proposal and the revised proposal is provided. Otherwise, the setbacks are compliant, bar about a centimetre for an existing wall, and exceeding the minimum setbacks by a significant degree for the upper level. And you'll notice that the assessment report, in terms of other DCP compliance, the table has yes on all of them. Importantly, to the next point about landscaping, the landscaped area is increasing from a non-compliant situation of 32% to 40%. There's 3 trees going, not 6 that were mentioned. Those 3 trees include a cypress ley landing and a crepe myrtle. I think that's a positive thing in the long-term management of views and landscape to remove a tree that isn't inappropriate in the area. There is a condition recommending 4 native trees to increase over or canopy in addition to our increase of the landscaped area. We have no objection to that. It actually has been shown on an updated landscape plan, which is approved through condition 1, so it doesn't really need to be conditioned. In terms of comments about processing, it's certainly been a thorough and robust assessment from both sides. We've been diligent and tried to provide things quickly. It's been efficient, yes. I wouldn't say rushed. It's been very thorough, and we've made a number of concessions. We think a reasonable has been about 4 months. Otherwise, I think in terms of a neighbour's concern about not visiting that site, the process in terms of the DA for all those properties that provided a concern or raised a concern about view impacts, I think the independent external assessing officer contacted all of those. We requested to ask for permission if we could to view that and do the updated montages and view analysis that's in accordance with the Land and Environment Court guidelines. Those were able to be contacted and gave such consent.
Sorry, Jason, could you just repeat that last bit about the inspections and the view analysis?
Well, the process that occurred was there was a number of submissions, and all the submissions that raised concerns about view impacts, the independent external consultant assessing the DA contacted those authors who raised those concerns and sought access for both himself, and we also requested if we could attend, respecting their wishes for privacy or otherwise. And all of those who were able to be contacted and who gave such consent were visited. In terms of the foreshore building line, which I think was probably the last point I've got, there is no encroachment on the foreshore building line. And I guess one of the benefits to try and adapt and extend the building rather than do a new building, which would be able to be done with likely greater impacts, is that the foreshore building line is being respected. But look, overall, I guess a summary from my point of view, I think, is a number of reasons to support this in terms of the wider public interest. The landscaped areas being improved, the tree cover and trees overall will be improved. The turning area will be improved, which I think will benefit the 9 owners that people are talking about. The view impact, while there's a height non-compliance, it's a process to consider that. The view impacts, I think, are either non-existent or negligible. Where there is a tiny little triangle you see in some of the views, particularly from 182, that essentially arises in all bar one case from the complying height and lift overrun. But otherwise, in terms of view sharing, I think the view impacts are so minor, particularly in the context of views remaining, but with some benefits for the proponent and an otherwise compliant development with the DCP, such that the balance of all of those impacts and benefits favour supporting the DA. I'm glad that's a conclusion that's been reached by the independent external planner, and we support the recommendation.
Thank you. And Mr. Thomas Berrigy, do you wish to add anything?
No, I don't wish to add anything. I was just here to address any questions. So thank you. I'll just rely on Mr. Perica's oral submission today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berrigy. Now, I'm sure that the panel will have some questions. So first of all, can I ask Gerard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in terms of the issue of the access, you made the comment that you're providing extension of the driveway for manoeuvring. Is that something which is a necessity? I mean, clearly we've been on site down there, we walked down there. cars are actually moving in and out of that car parking area as it is now. So I'm just questioning whether there is actually a necessity to actually provide that that provision, having regard to its proximity to the adjoining development. I mean, is there a comment or specific?
I'm happy to provide a comment, and Thomas may expand if he wishes, but essentially it's been done to try and meet the Australian standard of turning circles and enter and exit in a forward direction. Previously, there was an informal arrangement where, because of before the redevelopment of 182, there was some greater space to manoeuvre and turn out in a forward direction. That is no longer the case with the approval and construction of number 182. So yes, in our view, it's necessary to facilitate safe and orderly traffic movement and meet Australian standards. Thomas, I'm not sure if you want to add anything.
Oh, just for clarity. So at the moment, we are required to either reverse up the driveway or down the driveway. For some of, or for one of our vehicles, it's much easier to come in a forward-facing direction and then reverse out, which means reversing out onto Carrabba Road, reversing past those two competing right-of-way accesses, and it's not a terribly safe situation. So this modest driveway extension is designed to ensure that we can undertake a three-point turn at the bottom of the driveway and facilitate forward-facing ingress and egress. So that's the basis for it.
I mean, I'll certainly take advice on the issue of the Australian standard. My understanding is for a single dwelling, you don't need to reverse out of the driveway. That only applies to alternative forms of residential. So, but I'll take note on what you've just said. Thank you.
Just in terms of that, though, could you not provide a turntable for the cars to exit in a forward direction?
Thomas, do you want to add that, or are you happy for me to answer that? Look, I think external turntables may be a solution, but they are prone to failure. I think what's tried to be done is to combine an improvement to access and egress for vehicles with a separation for pedestrian entrance into the dwelling. We believe that that's an appropriate solution. I understand the probing of the issue because of the driveway issue raised by neighbours. But I think overall and in the long term, the solution arrived at would be better than a turning circle.
Yes, look, if I can add to that as well. In the early stages, we sought advice on that, and we're advised that it would be impractical on that site, given the slope of the driveway, the water running through it, and the limited amount of room to actually accommodate a turning circle. And in fact, we were advised that we would need both a driveway and both a driveway extension and a turning circle and a turntable. Both would be required to accommodate the size of the room required.
Just another question following on to that. As part of your submission, and I couldn't see it unless it's been provided, but have you provided any turning circles that demonstrate you need that size of extension?
No material has been provided, but the calculations have been performed by our architect.
I mean, the reason why that is asked as well, because you don't comply with the 2.5 metre requirement. At the moment, I think it's 1.8 metres.
Perhaps you could just clarify what that requirement is and where it arises from.
Jason?
I'm not sure. I'm assuming it was raised in a late submission in the last few days, and if it's raised in terms of the number of stories, really this relative to the height on our land is a ground floor extension, and at most a one-story extension. So I think the suggestion from the neighbour in terms of any visual screening of that, either by landscaping or a physical screen, is something that I think may ameliorate that concern. But I don't know. I haven't seen the submission from several days ago. It wasn't raised certainly in submissions from the public exhibition. Maybe it was raised in a recent submission directly to the panel that we haven't seen. But I wouldn't say it's a two-story building.
Yeah, okay. Can I ask Simon Smith, it was raised in your submission that it's 1.8 as opposed to 2.5.
Yes, that's relative to the stories requirements for low density residential. It's quite awkward, as you note on site, of what's ground versus where you measure. That's probably up for debate, but at above 3 stories, it's a 2.5 step back.
Okay,
It's
so
certainly not a 3-story structure, it's a driveway. And there's a retaining wall that's being slightly extended, so I'm not sure I'd agree with the characterisation of a driveway extension as a 3-story building. Certainly not on our side.
so
It is 4 stories, obviously there.
yeah, we can look at the plans, and just Jason, if I can just ask you, how far off the natural ground level is that apron?
The extension.
I don't have a section of that.
Just have a look at the survey. The closest, I'm just looking at the survey level, which the panel will have in your deliberations later on, for the garden area below it, where it essentially goes to a retaining wall, which you'll see on the survey and matches the retaining wall next door. The upper level of that ranges between 17.19 to 18.85, and the driveway levels around 21.16, so in the order of 3 metres.
3 metres above the natural ground level, okay.
Well, for that tiny little triangle that's extending, yeah, for part of the stone, or part of it, and then the other part's level, and the other part, it steps down twice. But even if you were to take, which I'm assuming is the logic from the neighbour, that, you know, the equivalent setback should be used for a number of story buildings, a 3-story extension would equate to 1-story building, and it's only for a triangle that tapers back off the boundary. As I'm just not sure where a 3-story setback comes from anyone's logic.
No, I'm not asking about the 3. I'm not asking about the setback. I'm asking about the height.
The height, yeah, okay. Well, from the survey, I've just got the survey in front of me, and from the surveys on that, at the worst point at the top of the stone wall where it's extending out to, the lowest level I can see there on the survey is 17.99.
Yeah.
And the concrete driveway closest to it is around 21 and a half. So between 3 to 3.5 metres would be my estimate, the worst location, but you can see that on the survey levels.
Yep.
Yeah,
okay, just one other question. Sorry,
if I can just add to that, apologies. Yeah, so the relevant DCP requirement for a structure of that height is no more than 1.8 metres.
Right, okay, but that's something that we can look at. Thank you very much for that. My interest was in what the height of the apron would be out of the ground. So my question also is that new turning area, is that within the boundaries of the site of 184?
Thomas, you're best answering that? Yeah. Yes, is my understanding.
Partially.
But the lease area from 184A as well.
Yeah, 184A as well, that's right.
It's a bit complicated. There's land both within 184 and then a 99-year lease over the apron garage for 184A. So that's why the application was made, affecting both properties.
Well, the application that I have in my papers described it as 184.
Yeah.
Not 184A. So that means if it's over the boundary, it's not part of the subject site, and it's something that we couldn't approve as such.
Except that
with landowner's consent from 184A.
Landowner's consent was provided. I think the assessment report does mention the land affecting the 99-year lease, and because we thought that may be an issue, landowner's consent was specifically provided for both, and the SDE outlined that there was both land involved.
But the description of the site is 184. Anyway, that's a matter we can look at.
I've just got one other question. You heard a lot of the neighbours raise concern about construction vehicles, and there's some reference made about the use of the harbour. Have you got a view or position in terms of that?
Thomas, do you want to raise that?
Yeah, now the harbour is
sorry, the harbour I'm happy to talk about. Look, I think sorry, I was talking more about the construction for you, Thomas, but Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. And you can add.
No,
whatever
it
you like.
was about the question
Oh,
is.
sorry. Yeah, sorry.
It's a
Oh,
question during, there's concern
about the
raised
access.
about
Yeah.
construction and
Yeah,
whether
sorry.
the harbour could be used. Have you got a view or position in terms of that?
Sorry, my misunderstanding.
Yeah, look, I mean, the first point to make is the excavation on this proposal is very, very limited. A very small amount of excavation just to accommodate a lift and a stairway around the lift or adjacent to the lift. So that is the extent of the excavation. It's no more than 3 metres deep. It's in the centre of the site. So very little excavation relative to the excavation proposed in sites all around Carrabba Point. So far more modest, and the amount of sort of earthworks that need removal is very, very limited. It would be overkill to use the waterfront. The waterfront is some 10 metres below where this excavation would be conducted. So you're talking about carrying fill and other material a long way from where it's being extracted to be removed. And we're talking about, you know, relatively shallow waters. You'd need a barge, you'd need a large crane, you'd need a lot of extra intrusive infrastructure on the harbour front to accommodate that form of construction, in my view.
I've got no more questions.
No questions? Yep. Have any questions? Right, very well. No further questions. So can I just thank everybody for their contribution today, and we will consider this matter, and our determination will be on the council's website. It's generally by close of business on Friday. If not, it will be close of business Monday. So I just like to thank you all for addressing and assisting the panel. Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, would you permit me to ask one question?
Oh, this is not a town page.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay then, rightio. Is it I don't believe we can. You've had your opportunity, and all of the questions have been addressed. So thanks very much. Okay, so we'll now move on to item number 2. Thank you all. Right, item number 2 is 184B, 186 and 190 Carrabba Road, Carrabba Point, and it's a demolition of buildings on the site and the construction of 2 dual occupancies and 2 residential flat buildings. We have 1 written submission that the panel is to look at, and that's from Guide Consulting. And we have a number of people wishing to address the panel. I'll just have a roll call as first. I've got Andrew Duggan.
Present.
Thank you. And I've got David and Lena Foti.
Yep.
Yep,
That's
thank
me.
you.
Nina's still at work.
Sean Barrett.
Present.
Thank you. Matthew Bartonell.
Here, thank you.
I have Guide Consulting. Oh, Sue Francis representing the applicant. Thank you. I have Tina Christie also. Yes, thank you, Tina. And Rebecca Crockett.
Yes, just observing today, thank you.
Observing, okay. And I have Rafe Wilson.
Here.
Right, thank you. And I have Alex Liu.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Michael Pezashinsky.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Edward Bunn.
Yes, I'm here.
Brett Maynard.
Yes, here also.
Yes, Fiona Binns. No. And Nick Sissom.
Yes, I'm here.
You're there. Thank you very much. And observing, we have Helen O'Loughlin, Peter Gill, and Thomas Berrigy. Okay, all right then. So I'll start off with those who registered to speak in terms of the objectors, submitters. Andrew Duggan, thank you. Andrew Duggan.
Yep, thank you, Madam Chair. Just getting the camera sorted. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Andrew Duggan. I'm a director at Ethos Urban, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the Owners Corporation of 192 Carrabba Road and the houses at 192A Carrabba Road. Firstly, we'd like to thank the officers for their report and note that we support their recommendation. We have a number of matters that we wish to raise in addition to those in the officers' report, which supports the recommendation for refusal. Most importantly, it's our view and something that we've maintained strongly in our two submissions that the panel doesn't have the power to approve this DA due to an absence of permissibility. The panel is aware of the unique...
Sorry, I can't hear you very well. Could you just speak up a little or speak into your microphone a bit more clearly?
The panel is aware of the unique zoning of the land with a mixture of R2 and R4 zone land. And both the applicant and assessing officer suggest the proposed development is permissible with consent, notwithstanding the split land uses. However, as we have previously raised at page 2 of our submission dated 27 February 2023 and page 2 of our submission dated 25 September 2023, there are essential elements of the proposed developments, Building A and Building B, which are both identified as residential flat buildings, which encroach onto the R2 low density zone land, and as such, the development is prohibited. Notwithstanding the fact that the substantive residential flat buildings are located in the R4 zone land, a residential flat building is comprised more than just the building that contains the dwellings, and relevantly includes landscaping and terracing and the like, all of which make up a residential flat building. Support for this proposition that the proposed development is serves a purpose of a dominant purpose of a residential flat building can be found in the court's decision of Chamwell and Strathfield Council. In that case, which involved a supermarket, the court recognised that elements such as car parking and landscaping could not be set aside as those individual elements, but rather form the purpose, in that case, of a supermarket being the dominant purpose. And we say that the landscape terraces that sit in the R2 land form the dominant purpose of a residential flat building, which is prohibited. In addition, the proposed terraces, landscaping and walkways servicing Buildings A and Building B can similarly be considered to be ancillary to the overall proposed development of a residential flat building. And therefore, the encroachment of these elements onto the R2 zoned residential land is not permitted, as residential flat buildings are prohibited under this zone. The officer has addressed this in a fashion in their report, noting that landscaping is permitted in both zones, but we say the landscaping is not a land use in its own right. It is a subservient land use to the dominant use of a residential flat building. And in this regard, it's our view that this panel doesn't have the power to prove the DA on that basis alone. A couple of other small matters we'd like to make is that the proposal also does not satisfy clause 6.9 of the North Sydney LEP, which deals with limited development in the foreshore area. The applicant has provided inconsistent information regarding the potential encroachment of buildings beyond the foreshore building line within the architectural plans and surveys. In addition, the proposal does not satisfy the site coverage and landscaping requirements. The applicant has submitted calculations for the entirety of the site area, stipulating the development should be considered in totality. As outlined at page 5 of our submission dated 27 February and page 8 of our submission dated 25 September, this approach is not in accordance with the definitions set out in DCP and incorrectly calculates facets of the development with the intention of demonstrating compliance. Further, due to non-compliant site coverage, the proposal has greater impacts on other various environmental factors, including a reduced non-compliance level of landscaping, insufficient solar access to adjoining properties, excessive bulk and scale, and unnecessary visual impacts. Thank you, panel.
Thank you, Andrew. Now I'll move on to David and Lena Foti. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, panel. Look, we bought our apartment in 2018, and the purpose for this apartment, it's a very small apartment, and all its value is in its view. Now, we did a lot of study, a lot of preparation for this. We contacted North Sydney Council, we directed to the compliance documents, so we felt fairly safe that our view would be protected. So we did all our homework.
Just before you go on, David.
I'm relying.
Yep. Can I just ask you, where are you located at 190? What have you?
143, sorry, 140. We're 43, number 143 Carrabba Road.
143 Carrabba Road.
Apartment 43, I apologise, yeah.
Apartment 43.
So apartment 43, 143 Carrabba Road.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies. So the value is in, and we're really relying on this process to make sure that our investment and our apartment going forward has its view and its value is safe. We I'd like to address. I know the DA is not compliant with the height restrictions. This DA application places a mass right in front of our view. So our view is now gone. The value in our apartment is gone if this DA if this application is successful. I'd also like to address the fact that the traffic in that street is quite congested, especially when you start adding removalist trucks. So we've got extra residents coming into this property. At the moment, 184B has a driveway area where removalist trucks or visitors can drive into. With this DA application, that's been totally removed, and there's no replacement to that. So any visitors have got nowhere they need to line up for a lift. Any trucks, removalist trucks, need to well, they can't park anywhere. There's nowhere for them to park because it's also no stopping on that side as well. So I'd like the panel to think about possible changes to the design here, where there could be an actual driveway like there is at the moment, where trucks can actually drive onto for their residents to unload and not further add congestion to the street. I'm just concerned also about the mass that goes right in front of it, the big block of building. Look, the current building, if we look at the new application, it's 4.14 metres above the current building. Now, ideally, I'd like it to stay at that current level so we can keep our view, but this really impacts on us. No further investigation has been done to really address the impacts of view from our apartment, so I'd like that to happen as well, but I strongly ask, or I ask the panel to really knock this back because it's just not compliant. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Can I invite now Sean Barrett?
Good afternoon, panel. I speak on behalf of townhouses 2 and 4 at 192 Carrabba Road, next door to the subject site. I support refusal of the DA, and it should not be deferred. The applicant may claim it can address the serious concerns of our community, but they have not shown themselves capable of satisfying the council's concerns up until now, and they have not communicated with neighbours on our concerns. On another point, the DA states that it is acceptable to fully obscure all sunlight from the front gardens and common garden area of 192 Carrabba Road, because a complying development would block the sun anyway. That assumes that a merits assessment of a complying development would be approved when it blocks all sun from those spaces that already experience minimal levels of sun. It is already hard to grow screening vegetation in front gardens, and this should not be further impacted by a non-complying development. If I might move to another point, if the panel is inclined to approve the DA, the panel should be aware that the applicant's traffic report is incorrect. Vehicles cannot pass in different directions outside the subject site without one of them stopping and pulling over to the side. Continuing on looking at traffic, if the panel decides to approve the DA, it's essential to impose a condition of consent to control street parking by construction workers. There must be a condition of consent, not a construction management plan. A consent which requires the builder to provide a bus to the site from public car parks in North Sydney. A condition of consent is the only way the community can be satisfied the council has the suitable enforcement levers. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Sean. Now I'll move to Matthew Bartonell. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
I'm representing the owners of 184A, which contains two apartments or dual occupancy duplex dwellings, and the owner of 184 downslope of that property. First of all, I would support what was said by the Ethos Urban representative, that the proposal breaches the zoning requirements. The proposal effectively seeks to adjust the zone boundaries and seeks to have a residential flat building within a site within the R2 zone. I won't say anything further about that because it's already been covered by that other representative. In relation to the matters in the officer's report that deal with the whether the proposal achieves the zone objectives, I would say that the officer's report does not mention setback non-compliances as part of that concern. And the officer's report in general underplays the extent to which the proposal breaches setback requirements. In some respects, it frames that as a lack of sufficient information. However, our submission does go through the building height plan compliance and identifies a number of significant non-compliances, particularly in relation to the rear setback of the residential flat building, which is taken to be the proposed or the rear property boundary, the eastern boundary of the residential flat buildings. We just focused on building A because that's of interest to my clients who are to the north, and we identified quite substantial non-compliances as well as non-compliances from the northern side boundary with the building height plan. So we think that I think that that's been not adequately covered in the officer's reasons for refusal, and I would seek for setback non-compliances to be included in those points. We support what has been said about site coverage, that the proposal seeks to demonstrate compliance based on the whole site, whereas each particular site, each of the 4 proposed sites, needs to comply separately. that access handles and rights of way have been incorrectly included in the site area for the purposes of those calculations, and that leads to greater degrees of non-compliance. And also in relation to the landscaped area compliance, a number of elements have been included as landscaped area, which should be excluded. And therefore the degree of non-compliance with the landscaped and site coverage controls of the DCP is greater than stated in the application to a significant degree. And as is made clear in the officer's report, these controls are very important, or compliance with these controls is particularly important when we have a system that does not have a floor space ratio. In relation to view impacts,
Yes, can I just remind you that you've extended your you've exceeded your 3 minutes, but you can finish up concisely.
Okay, I'll go quickly. View impacts, we are concerned about the accuracy of the submitted representations of view impact, and also that in relation to 184 Carrabba Road, inadequate vantage points have been considered. We state an objection to the proposed rooftop terraces in the dual occupancy development at the bottom of the site, because they breach clause provision 8 within 1.3.10 visual privacy of the DCP, and there are requirements for a maximum of 18 square meters, for example, and a number of provisions there which are meant to be when a rooftop terrace is allowed as a kind of exception, and those criteria are not complied with. And so the rooftop terraces for the dual occupancies should also not be supported, and we would ask for that to be included as a reason for refusal. And I think that now adequately covers our concerns.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. That's all the submitters that I have on the line. Is anybody else out there that wished to make a submission in opposition to the development? Very well. Now we'll move to the team representing the applicant. I have Susan Francis and your team. I'll be in your hands, and the architect is Michael Fountain or Michael Pezoshinsky. We got the architect.
Chair, what was that?
Do you have the architect there?
Yes, we do have the architect. That's Rafe.
Okay. Can I leave it to you as to how you wish to address the panel, Sue?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair and panel members. I'd probably first like to talk about, well, there's a couple of issues here. You will have received, and I know you've already acknowledged that you received our submission in relation to the report in front of you. I'm very mindful of the fact that the application is for a refusal, and in the absence of any conditions of consent without prejudice, you have no choice but to either go with a recommendation, or as I would recommend to you or suggest to you, which would be a deferral. The report, or the additional information we've provided you, addresses the fundamental issues raised in the report, we believe, but there are some aspects which I suspect the panel might want to have some questions on, and would be happy to address those. But I'd also like to talk to the specific issue that Mr. Duggan raised in relation to permissibility. This has been the most fundamental issue we looked at when we considered looking at this site. It's unique in this respect, but we have been very, very particular about how the site has been developed, with which built form is on which permissible land use zoning, to ensure that we have not done what Mr. Duggan has said in terms of land use configuration. We have not, in my mind, got a dominant use, as he's using the Chamwell case. We are a residential flat building on the R4 zone and a dual occupancy on the R2 zone. But I will acknowledge that it is being developed as one development, but I wouldn't want to constrain the development of this piece of land, regardless of its zoning, to be constrained by zone boundaries, which in this context are artificial for the purposes of the development as a whole. Not for permissibility, absolutely understand that, but for the built form that you produce. So we've been very careful to design it, to integrate it, I don't mean in a non-permissible way, but to integrate this development and for it to be considered as a whole. And yes, we have considered landscaping and built upon area under the DCP as a whole, because we consider this to be the most desirable way to solve these problems. And in terms of compliance, we're pretty much compliant. But there are some particular issues that I will ask individual experts. So I've got the architect and they'll go through some of the graphics. They might be able to show you the permissibility lines, because we have a permissibility versus, we have a development versus the zones map, which if you've looked at the website, you will have seen. And also to look at the views issue, which we have Nick here to talk about the views, because we've had some very detailed view analysis done. In relation to the terraces, we have responded to that issue in our additional information. I would say that in relation to land on the foreshore, you are sitting in front of the biggest piece of open space you can possibly have. Plus you have the foreshore building line, which we do not intend to build on in any way, shape or form. We've said that on our additional information. We have information, we have terraces, we have the foreshore building line, and we also have the rooftop terraces. And we have said in our submission that additional screening can be put on those terraces, because the land is sloped and that land is pretty much not much different to ground line anyway at that point. And I'm trying to look at a picture that I've got that shows me the ground line. We can screen those terraces, but I would think that screening should be minimal in the context of a foreshore environment where views are generally obtained at a lower level across people's open space. But I'll let council ask some questions on that. I do have, I would like specifically in relation to the questions that have been asked, Nick to, respond to the question of views from the development or from the development behind, which is 143. Being mindful, of course, that we fully comply with the height limit at that point. It's a tiny, tiny breach as the land falls halfway in the middle of the site when the cliff falls away. So it is a compliant development with a view a corridor right down the throat of the site. So we've been very mindful to maintain some public and private views, but I will ask Nick to respond specifically to that particular unit if we manage to get access. Over to you, Nick.
Thanks. So yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to point out. Just wanted to note that we did actually do a letter drop to 143. Unfortunately, we did not receive a response. So we couldn't actually produce any certified photo montage.
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said there, Nick.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just wanted to point out with 143, we did actually do a letter drop requesting access. Unfortunately, we did not receive any response, so we couldn't undertake any photography or surveying to produce accurate photo montages for assessment. However, we did base a very high-level assessment based on fieldwork observations and desktop analysis. And based in our opinion, any minor non-compliances would not generate any significant view impacts, and that's as a result of the oblique angle of any potential views and location of the east elevation relative to the site, and also viewing heights. But we would welcome, we would have definitely done an assessment from 143 if given access.
I suppose if there is particular concern from the panel, we'll be happy to go and visit and undertake some further work if there is a deferral to address some of these issues. So I'll leave that with the panel. Rafe, perhaps it might be a good idea if you were to run through some of the issues that might have been addressed in the additional information, but particularly the permissibility issue. The the diagram that shows the zone boundaries and the development might be quite of assistance to the panel. And with your leave, Chair.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Sue. I'll just get my screen up. Can everyone see that okay?
Not yet.
Oh.
And now.
Yeah, okay, great. So to talk to the first point, which is about the location of the buildings on the site and as they relate to the zoning. We, as Sue said, we've been very careful to contain particularly the RFBs at the top of the site and the R4 zones to within the R4s. So you can see this diagram here outlines the existing site boundary, which I'm just highlighting for you now in blue, which is the current zone boundary. And you can see the R4 buildings are completely within that divide between the R4 and the R2. So there is no leak from that or blur from that kind of higher massing allowance into the lower massing allowance. So we're really careful about that. I'll touch quickly on another point that was raised, which was the foreshore setback line. I think this was brought up in the report, and it was noted that some of our building was within that foreshore setback line. Oh, excuse me, I just got to jump between sheets quickly here. There we go. So again, I'm highlighting the foreshore setback line here. And you can see that the building is completely contained behind that line. That includes the terraces, the enclosed area, which is the GFA, and even the substantial landscape. So there is a minor bit of landscape work which happens in that area, and really that's about making good the existing stairs, which allow access from the centre of the site down to the foreshore area. So there's no substantial work at all proposed within that area. And actually, as part of the submission, we significantly pulled back from the foreshore to try to better align with the neighbouring setbacks. Another point I might touch on quickly is the method for calculating area for the purposes of site calculations. I think from the people who presented here today and also from the report we received, there was some discussion about how we address the items in the RFI. I just want to note that for the purposes of calculations, the easement in the northwest corner of the site has been excluded from the total site area, which kind of talks to that point about access handles and easements. We've then gone through and been very careful and methodical about addressing the points in the RFI and making sure we've attributed certain parts of the site to the areas required. So the site cover, for example, includes bin areas on ground, covered walkways. We've been careful to remove the in-ground tanks from landscape area calculations. And so what we've come up with is a calculation that we feel is completely compliant with the points set out in the RFI and in the DCP. I could talk quickly to some of the diagrams we resubmitted. I think one of the key points was to do with excavation. And I just wanted to point this diagram out to the panel because it's really useful in showing not just where we were and how, or rather how we're complying, but where we are compared to where we were at the original submission. So you can see this green line here represents the excavation which was put forward with the original DA submission. So taking on board the comments we received from council in the RFI, we've gone back and modified that excavation really significantly, including deleting an entire basement level. And that blue line, I hope everyone can see that okay, represents the new proposed excavation. And that's just one slice through the site, but that really is representative of the strategy throughout. And again, on the opposite elevation, you can see there's been a really concerted effort to eliminate a huge amount of that excavated area. I might just quickly point everyone or bring everyone's attention to the height plane diagrams, which I believe are resubmitted with Guide's letter. So the original submission was assessed under Merman. So we used the building pads that we had on site. we prepared pretty detailed documentation to show how then we would recalculate those height plans using the better method. And we did include a drawing which shows the exact points we took on site and how we extrapolated the information from the surveyed information. What these diagrams actually show us is that there isn't a huge amount of variation. And in fact, the better was slightly worse for us because we lose out on those building pads, which in actual fact are above the existing or natural ground because they sit proud of the site. So that's the R4 zone you can see there with Better and Merman, and then the same for the R2. We're looking here at Better, the extrapolated, and then Merman there. So I think those are probably the critical things we wanted to talk through in terms of architectural diagrams, but very happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Very well. Can I invite the panel to ask any questions they may have? Now, first of all, I haven't really heard your response to the recommendation in the council officer's report and their reasons there. So could I just understand what your response to the council officer's concerns?
They were mostly raised in the response to, in our response to you, in relation to height, setbacks. Sorry, I'm going to try to now turn to your reasons for refusal. So they're mostly covered by the response to you.
Okay.
Let me just turn. Hold on. I'm just turning to the reasons for refusal in my report. Bear with me. I would disagree that it doesn't satisfy the objectives of the zone. There are two zones. This is a development which eminently tries to do exactly that, satisfy the objectives of the zone. And whilst there are some minor non-compliances in terms of some elements of the DCP, it's a function of the complexity of the site in terms of its own structure and also in terms of its topographic structure. But in all of those respects, views are minimally affected, if at all, and the breaches are minimal, if at all. And contextually, I think it sits very well within the site. The Design Excellence Panel were extremely complimentary about the application in its first, when we first put it up to them. There has been a change in building materials to address their concerns initially. That wasn't a particular surprise, and we did do that. And so the issue that I think is outstanding, that I think the information that we've put with you does deal with, is a concern about traffic and the solution to access, which is, I'm afraid, the issue with any development along Corraba Road. We've already heard it in relation to 184. The solution here, and we do have the traffic engineer with us, and you may wish to talk to him about the issues raised by that and the solutions that we have put in our submission to you as to what we think is the most desirable. There are consequences in relation to landscape area and built upon area in terms of bringing that parking off the site. But in the
well, as I understand it, there's already deficiencies in terms of landscaped area, and we're over the site coverage.
I would dispute that. I would dispute that. If there is any deficiency, it's extremely minor. And it's in the 1 or 2%, if that. Yeah, and it's a function of whether you include an architectural overhang as being site cover, which is 3 stories up, as affecting the landscape area or unbuilt upon area. The density is pretty much spot on in terms of the council's controls, given the topographic constraints of this site and trying to integrate a development rather than 2 separate flat buildings and somehow trying to get houses down the back. The access, and this is the other thing that needs to be borne in mind, as an integrated development, we have a single access point. If these are developed as separate developments, we're going to have an access point for the for 1 or 2 flat buildings. Then we're going to have some form of access, not dissimilar to 184, 182, and that we've been hearing on the previous matter, with trying to get access to the foreshore. What we've managed to achieve here is access to the site and integrate a development and an access that solves that problem. So it's solving quite a few problems that are being experienced by pretty much every development down there, and as you've experienced for the previous item on this agenda. But we're happy to have discussions, and as I said, we have Brett here who can answer you some specific questions in relation to traffic.
Yeah, can I just ask a question on the issue of traffic? This is Jared Teresi.
Yep.
I noticed in building A, you've designed the car lift to be integrated into the built form. But for building B, you've actually had it separate. So therefore you're relying on the street to actually relying on the street for a waiting bay or to wait to be able to get a car in if there's a car coming out. Why have you adopted 2 different approaches?
I'll let the architect and the traffic engineer answer that question.
Rafe, perhaps you would like to talk to why the building is the way it is. I would just encourage the panel to look at the shape of the land parcel and how we've been able to treat the boundary condition in terms of a waiting bay on one building. On the other building, the street condition is slightly different. We've got a situation where there's no impact for a vehicle to wait temporarily on the street, if at all, to access a car lift and avoiding having that impact the building form there. But also in terms of the discussion that Sue has just mentioned in terms of the implications on the landscaping and the area of concrete driveway that's required for two-way operation and to keep that off street. But Ray, perhaps you'd just like to talk to the integration side of it.
Just before you go from there, that clearly is the pinch point of the road, and why wouldn't you set it back and take some of the unit space out and allow it to be pushed forward into the site?
I would dispute that that's a pinch point in the road. Where we have that car lift effectively at the boundary, that is where the street is wider. In the initial response to submissions, we clearly demonstrated with swept path analysis and showing the effectively the parking envelope on either side of the street and the ability for 2 cars to pass. That was obviously raised by one of the other objectors, and I would refute that there's any error in our analysis in that regard. We've clearly shown 2 vehicles passing, and I'm happy to put that up on the screen.
Yeah, but it is a fork in the road as well. We've been out on site. We know what it's like. So I don't think you need to put it up.
Is there any constraint as to why you can't integrate the lift into the built form?
I'll field that one. I think Sue had sort of touched on it in her initial comments. The short answer, well, I think the reasons Brett has raised sort of guided the architecture anyway, in terms of obviously it's desirable from an architectural standpoint to try to separate out the car lift if possible, because it's more work in terms of acoustics and separation and that sort of thing when you're thinking about the quality of your units. We have the opportunity, or the analysis shows we have the opportunity at the south of the site to push the car lift towards the front of the site with the waiting bay on the street. So that was what drove the architecture there. The position of the car lift at the north of the site is largely driven by the fact that we have to provide access to our neighbours to the north. In terms of can it be integrated into the building, and I might just share my screen quickly. Guide included in their response 2 options that we did a quick desktop study on with our traffic engineer to look at what the impact would be on integrating that southern car lift into the bill form. The first and, you know,
can I just say that these plans, that your response that was received, when was it received in council?
Monday, I think.
Monday, very well. Yes, they haven't been assessed, and they're not the subject of the development assessment. If you are seeking to amend your plans at the 11th hour, well, we're not in a position to take these on board for the purposes of our consideration, because they have to be assessed. We are just a determining body.
With respect to I did ask for a deferral, because if we were asking for approval, you don't have any plans in front of you. This is a solution to a concern that was raised. It's not one that the traffic engineer believes is necessary, but it is an option that could be considered. This is an application, unlike the one that was before you that has been in council for over 12 months. And we've had one letter of concern raised, which we responded to. These issues were never raised with us as a concern. So this is the first opportunity we have had to address them. And that's why we have sought to address them. And I appreciate that it's late. I understand that, but we only got the report last Thursday, I think, Thursday.
Thank you.
And they are useful in just sort of outlining quickly what the impact would be in looking at alternative solutions to the position of the car lift. And the first one I want to touch on quickly is that if you do include a waiting bay on site, it effectively increases dramatically that sort of vehicular crossover, which is something we know is a sensitive issue in this area. And we wanted to do what we could to minimise frontage that was dedicated to, you know, exclusively traffic uses.
What if you move that car lift, as I said, to the right, to the east?
Yep.
And because that's a very large dwelling there. That's and right. I know we haven't got an FSR, but the GFA that's being achieved by this is significant. And in terms of the impacts, these sorts of matters should be looked at.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. And the impact is that you get that increased frontage, which is dedicated to hard stand and vehicle access on Carrabba Road. And it also has a knock-on effect.
Yeah, okay.
And very briefly, it also has a knock-on effect on the landscape and the unbuilt upon area calculations. And we know, particularly, you know, with the proximity to the harbour and the topography of the site, any hard stand is something to be closely looked at. You know,
but couldn't that be rectified by reducing the footprint of the building, the landscaping?
I mean, they're potentially two different issues, because I mean the driveway would contribute to unbuilt upon area.
You're linking them. So the question is that if you're saying you don't want to do the change because that's going to decrease landscaping, why can't you decrease landscaping by having smaller footprints of buildings, for instance?
Well, what this change does is, in simple terms, is swap site coverage for unbuilt upon area. A reduction of overall site coverage to increase landscape area is you know, potentially a different issue. But yeah, I mean that's how you would have to offset. You'd either have to take it from unbuilt upon area or from site coverage.
I think one of the key points here is it goes to the necessity of doing so and having such a large area off street. We've made the point in the letter that you've received earlier this week that what we're talking about is 3 to 4 vehicle movements in a peak hour. So the likelihood that anyone needs to use the waiting bay is extremely low. And so you can imagine the impact of a vehicle there, you know, for you know, up to 2 minutes once an hour, which may actually never occur, given that that's a maximum of 1 vehicle every 15 minutes. You'd be pretty unlucky that you've got 2 vehicles trying to pass here. So part of this is really about whether it's necessary to have that arrangement.
Well, it's also a question whether it's necessary to have a waiting bay, because on that point you're making, you can actually use sensors where priority is always given for vehicles entering the site, not necessarily exiting the site.
And that's already proposed. So if there was a vehicle approaching and there can obviously be some sort of remote call system put in place these days, that the entering vehicles are always given that permission. I guess the waiting bay is a notional thing. We're not talking about line marking that on the ground. Per council's report, there's council's traffic engineer doesn't believe there's any need to modify the existing no stopping zone. It would simply be a location that a vehicle may need to wait in the unlikely event that a vehicle was already coming out of the car lift. So that would be the scenario that the car lift is already in use for a vehicle exiting, because otherwise it's prioritising the entering vehicles.
Can I just ask a question of my own expert? Rafe, how many levels, if you were to put the car lift in the building, how many levels of accommodation would need to be removed?
Well, I mean, it's effectively the whole building, because you need to look at overrun on the level above. Obviously this level at ground and the level below. So
it's 2 or 3 levels.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Sorry, what do you mean by levels? Isn't it just loss of floor space?
Over multiple levels.
Yeah, but it's not loss of levels, it's loss of floor space.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I think the concern architecturally is really about that frontage. We've already had to accommodate the easement to the north, and we were doing everything we possibly could to minimize the impact of this development on the streetscape character by trying to keep that frontage to a minimum, and give the building a good address from a pedestrian standpoint.
Can I understand, I'm moving on to another question. Can I understand the rationale behind why you've calculated site coverage and landscaping holistically, but then at the same time, you've made this application on the basis that they're 4 individual buildings on 4 individual sites? I mean, what's the rationale that you've taken that view?
Well, perhaps I'll answer this question. We would have loved to have integrated the flat buildings underground, but if you think about it, we can't, because it's R2 zoned. So we had to keep them as 4 separate, those 2 separate buildings, and then the rest were dual occupancies. So they needed to be dual occupancies, and we wanted to get access to the water. So it wasn't so much that we chose to have 4 buildings, built forms. It's just that the permissibilities forced us into 2 built forms in terms of the residential flat building. We couldn't go over the R2 land because it's prohibited. So we had to keep them as 2 separate buildings.
So therefore, why would you not be applying the landscape and site coverages to each of those individual lots?
Because the whole development is integrated as one. When you walk into that site, you don't think you're walking into one flat building or another flat building. It is one development. It is integrated. The permissibility alignments, where the lines are, is a furphy to the development of this site. It's something we have to deal with, but it shouldn't constrain the built form development.
So then why wouldn't ADG apply if you're then going to say to me it's one building?
ADG does apply. Sorry, ADG doesn't apply because it doesn't apply because of the size of the development. The size of the development. It has separate permissibilities as a matter of fact and law. It has to be an RFB and an RFB in the R4 and dual occupancies on the lower level R2. ADG doesn't apply to the dual occupancies, and it doesn't apply to the flat buildings because of the size of them. They're not integrated in terms of a basement, but they're integrated as a form of development.
And we understand that, but the difficulty is, on the one hand, it's being developed as a holistic development, but on the other hand, where we have to have regard to the zones, and so having regard to the zones, it seems that you need to comply for site coverage and landscaped area for those individual lots, not put it holistically in terms of, well, we've got this great swathe of waterfront foreshore building, non-building area.
I understand the controls.
Every site must comply with what the controls are for it, as opposed to Well, it's an integrated development. Well, it's going to appear as that, which is great, but at the same time, we've got the zones, which are the impediment to considering it in that format. And so the zone requirements and the site coverage and landscaped areas for each site must comply.
Well, this is where I have a difference of opinion, because it's the DCP, which is a guideline document that is setting controls for different types of development. It doesn't assume, it's never contemplated that those controls would apply to a site so constrained or aligned in terms of the zoning and the built forms that are going to go on it. Nor did it ever contemplate that you would have a development that is described legally as dual occupancies and 2 residential flat buildings that would be integrated as one address. So the controls, I would say, need to be considered as a whole. The DCP controls, guidelines, to be applied flexibly in accordance with the Act as they apply to the specifics of a site.
Well, on the one hand, we're applying it, anyway, I won't go there, but we're applying, we're having the 4 lots and the permissibility, and we've have to respect that in terms of the built form.
We don't have 4 lots, we have 1 development.
Okay, yeah.
We've got the zonings, which...
We have zonings, which is on land. We can't avoid the alignment of those zone boundaries, but the development within those zone boundaries is permissible, we say.
We're not questioning the permissibility. No.
And then once we've dealt with the permissibility, we then have a whole.
Yeah, wait.
I mean, there's a question of permissibility, and we're not necessarily questioning that per se. Although obviously, we'll look at the plan you prepared where you show the boundaries to satisfy ourselves. But putting that aside, it's a subsequent part of the merit assessment of the built form and how it then sits on the site. So we have a set of controls which actually determine and help us determine what is appropriate on each of those individual blocks, because that's what they are. You're not consolidating this as part of this application.
Yeah, well, it's not it's going to have one strata.
Of this application.
It's going to have 1 strata. I'll take advice from the architect and perhaps Edward on here. As far as I'm concerned, it is one development.
Then why doesn't SEP 65 then apply?
Because the development only has 3 units in each RFB.
No, because the only way you got
and
3
they're
units
on separate.
On each. No, exactly, because they're on separate lots. So we're having a circular debate.
Yeah. It very rarely arises, this situation, but I suppose we have to be consistent in the way we...
Well, I'd say ADG is a guide document as well. We're happy to do an assessment under ADG. In fact, we'd probably be pretty much close to complying anyway. It's a guide document. And again, the ADG doesn't contemplate something like this either.
Yeah, okay.
I've got no more questions.
Yeah. No further questions.
Well,
I just want to say on that point, we did originally submit with separate calculations for each site, or rather each zone, and they were very, very close to being fully compliant. It was our interpretation of the RFI, which I think sought clarification on the development as a whole, that led us to combine those calculations. But they were in there in the original DA, and what you see on the most recent RFI submission isn't misleading in any way. It was very, very near fully compliant, I think, on the individual zones, and where there were minor non-compliances, they have been sort of shared, and the aggregate is what you see in the RFI.
I've got a question. It seems that the Design Excellence panel had some positive thoughts about your proposal, but you've let yourself down, it seems to me, by not being able to provide the adequate information on the landscaped area, site coverage, particularly building envelope, to enable the council consultants to adequately determine the site coverage and landscaped area in particular. When did the council consultants or the council approach you for more accurate information on the site coverage and landscaped area? Have you known about this problem they had for a few weeks, or I just want to understand the history of the processing of the application?
The response to the RFI was on the 16th of August, if I've got my figures correct. And then council re-advertised the scheme on the 1st of September. We haven't heard anything since. At that point, as far as I know, it wasn't being outsourced. I suspect once it was outsourced, the consultant was given the files and said, write a report on this.
Okay, so very well. Look, I think we've probably exhausted all that we need to discuss here and now. I hear what you've asked for, Sue, and that is for a deferral. So would the deferral be to provide the information that Ian's just identified and to look at it rather than, the problem is, you've got to appreciate, you can't cherry pick. On the one hand, it's an integrated development, and on the other hand, we've got 2 zones, etc. We need to have regard to the controls that are in place for each of the zones as such. So
I'm happy in any deferral, Chair, to provide you with a separated analysis of all the controls, as well as a integrated one. Likewise, I'm happy to look at ADG and do that as well for additional information.
Yeah.
Likewise,
and also recognising that, you know, at first blush, when I look at those figures of landscaping, built upon area, etc., it would appear to be an overdevelopment and that it somehow needs to be scaled back.
Well, can I just say one thing? If you, what I understood until, well, sorry, Sue, in terms of your comment made a moment ago, if this is going to be one site, one strata plan, then I do think SEP 65 applies. And even if you want to put a position forward that sort of says, well, you know, 3A applies and we can vary controls, you still need to have regard to SEP 65, because at this stage, from what I can see in the submission, SEP 65 has been excluded in the assessment. Whether or not what the outcome of that is a different discussion.
look, I'm happy to, as I said, I'm happy to do that analysis because I am not too worried about its compliance with that as a matter of general principle.
Okay.
Sean?
No, we don't. This is not a question and answer in terms of somebody wishing to
Sean,
comment on the meeting. I was going to see and comment on there. So because, you know, if the applicant is just going to really dress up the same thing, then, you know, the other option for us is to refuse it, and then you have the option of a Section 82A review.
I would say that this application has been so long in design and so long in consideration that I think we should be given the opportunity to address these issues that we did not know about until the report that came out.
Very well. Anyway, thank you all very much for assisting the panel, and it has been a very robust discussion, and we'll have our decision on the internet by COB Monday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's move to item number 3 now. Gosh. Okay, item number 3 is 172 Carrabba Road, Carrabba Point. We can't seem to get out of that neck of the woods. And this is to modify consent for alterations and additions to an attached dual occupancy. And we have the architect with 1 written submission, and we also have registered to speak Paul Berkemere. You there, Paul? Yes, I can see you on screen. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This will be much quicker and is actually a very minor matter compared to the previous ones you've looked at. I'm the owner, also the architect, and I'm the resident of the said property. And to just give you a quick bit of background, you have the submission I wrote, but the key thing is that the only thing that problem I have with the recommendation is to part 2B, which is about the shape of the balcony, where the heritage planner is objecting to the proposed slight curve, saying that it should remain as straight. By way of background, we've had quite a clever condition on the consent, which was that the proposal I had for a semicircular balcony, in fact, be set back in line with bay. And so I accepted that at the time.
Unfortunately, you seem to be dropping in and out.
As well as the other conditions, and then I designed that. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, I'll keep still. Is that any better now?
That's
Can you
better,
hear me?
yes.
Okay, I'll keep very still. So I redesigned this, but my judgment was that the appearance of the recommendation.
Actually,
in fact,
Paul, can I ask you to turn off your camera because it's cutting in and out, your voice. So could you turn, thank you. Now continue to address us.
Fine, sure. So, okay. When we designed it in detail and we did the design development, I was not happy with the shape. So I actually went through various modifications, looking at slight curvature and other ideas to curve, which has no impact on anyone. And it's not visible from the street, it's visible from the waterfront, but it's in a very minor way. So I proceeded with that as part of the amendment. Unfortunately, the Heritage Officer, I believe, has a mistaken idea of the impact. And in my submission, I give an argument for why each of the points raised by the Heritage Planner, I believe, are not correct. And so I ask the panel to consider the scheme on its merits. And perhaps if you have any questions, we might have questions on my submission, for example.
No, we don't. It's clear. So thank you very much, Paul, for attending today. And
if I can just, could I just sum up very quickly?
Of course.
Because it's a particularly frustrating thing for me as the architect, because I've been involved in heritage work for all my career. And in fact, I sit on various planning panels. And the frustrating thing is that I don't believe this particular idea of the curvature has been assessed by any qualified architect as part of the process. It's the opinion of the heritage planner, who's not a registered architect. So I'll just leave you with that. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, then thank you very much, Paul. We hear what you say. But I mean, what would be the impediment of there's no angles in the development of the heritage item. It's curves, as we saw on site today. Yep. And it will be visible from the foreshore. So is it something that you cannot live with, the requirement to?
Well, I wouldn't be going through this agonising process if I didn't think it mattered. It does matter. It's an architectural idea. It's about the character of the building. And in fact, if you think about it, I can accept the fact that the semicircular curve was a more extreme version, even though I thought it was an appropriate one. The idea of having the slight bow springing from the two existing corners, to me, is a very minor element in the building. And it's important to have that sense of, to me, it's a sense of modelling of the building. And so it is, it is different, but it's not uncommon. I only need to point you to the arts and crafts movement in, people like CFA Voisey in England, other buildings all around. So to me, it's quite bizarre that we're sitting here talking about a small curvature on a balcony when in fact it has minimal impact.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I'm getting set up.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. We want to give everyone the opportunity. So thank you. Great.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, panel.
Rightio, now let's move on to item number 4, which is now we're in Walker Street, 173 to 179 Walker Street, and 11, 15 and 17 Hampton Street, North Sydney. And we have registered to speak Andrew Duggan again, and we have written submissions John Moranio and Ethos Urban. We have a number of people observing only, and so none of the other people observing wish to speak? No? Okay, let's go to Andrew Duggan. Thank you.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of Cbus Property, who are the applicant for the development. We broadly support the recommendation for approval put forward by the officers and thank them for their work. We put our concerns in a written letter to council on the 4th of December, which I trust has been disseminated to panel members. And they largely relate to what I would characterise as procedural matters with the consent. In particular, we seek that, let me step back one. The consent, as it is recommended, is subject to some 20 deferred commencement matters. I've been a planner for over 25 years. I don't think I've ever seen a consent 25 deferred commencement matters. Now, I understand the reasoning for this. I understand the absence of the need to get construction certificates for demolition and council wanting to retain a degree of oversight over pre-works conditions. That is fine. I completely understand that. I think that 20 deferred commencement matters is unreasonable, and we have set out those that we believe are relevant to the DA, and we've noted those in the colour red in that letter you have. Those in yellow we have noted as we believe could be put into operational conditions, so conditions that simply require certain things to be done before works commence, and if they are not done, council has a broad discretion of enforcement powers for them, everything from infringement notices through to orders, through to the more punitive measures like court enforcements to ensure that these works are done. And there are some matters that we accept could rightly be considered as deferred commencement matters, and we've noted those in green as well. So we simply seek to have the consent reordered so that the matters in red are not relevant at all and don't need to be there as deferred commencement matters. The matters in yellow move to just more operational conditions, and the matters in green can stay as deferred commencement matters. The final point I would like to make, Madam Chair, is council has only nominated 6 months for these deferred commencement matters to be satisfied. The practical effect of not satisfying deferred commencement matters within the prescribed timeframe is that the consent effectively lapses. So 6 months for 20-odd deferred commencement matters is almost like a Clayton's consent. We would ask that be pushed to 2 years. Had these been regular operational conditions, an applicant would have 5 years to satisfy these matters. So we think that 2 years is a fair time in which to satisfy those deferred commencement matters. So that is effectively a summary of the letter that has been sent to the panel. Here with a representative from Cbus Property, and we're happy to answer any questions the panel may have.
Right, okay then. I'll just see if the panel has any questions. 2 years is often considered not to be unreasonable for deferred commencement conditions, in particular given the amount of works that are required from time to time. Okay, any questions from the panel?
Anyone else has a question? I'm thinking, sorry.
Ken? Ian? No, we have just, so you're just saying that the drainage works are the only matters that require a deferred commencement.
That's our view, is that is legitimately a deferred commencement matter that we accept should stay in that category. The rest can be operational.
So are you planning on just one CC for this, or stage CCs, or?
That's the hub of the issue, Madam Chair. There's no CCs. This is for demolition and site preparation.
Demolition. Well, so you're saying that the tree measures can become operational?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm going to ask it.
Yep.
I've got a question, and I understand you might have already been aware that this might come up at today's meeting about the issue of loss of affordable housing. And I understand you have prepared a response today in view of that comment which was made on site when we went out. I notice in your response you make reference to clause 447F, but I've also looked at your submission and I didn't see that you've addressed the issue of affordable housing, loss of affordable housing. I note in your submission you make reference to the issue of the relevant fire safety requirements and the need and the estimate costs of carrying out the work. But I guess the question I've got is that has come literally a few hours before this meeting. Have you made any assessment of this development prior to today regarding the affordable housing provisions?
In terms of assessing each of the dwellings proposed to be demolished and whether they meet the definition of low income housing or low rental housing, the answer to that is no. That the properties that my client acquired were 50% vacant at the time they acquired them, and then they became 100% vacant immediately sort of thereafter. So to go through all the properties and understand whether they were owner occupied, rented, what that rent was for all 44, that work hasn't been done. It would be fair to say that there might be some that fall under. There might be some that might be over. However, we've considered this in the broader strategic framework. The panel might be aware this site is subject to a site-specific local environmental plan and development control plan that provides for high-density living by way of a tower development and 2 podium buildings. And it's also subject to a voluntary planning agreement that is registered on title that requires 5% of the dwelling yield of future dwellings on site to be dedicated in perpetuity to council as affordable housing, and there's equally a monetary contribution means if that dedication doesn't occur. So the applicant can elect in the development application that was lodged last year and withdrawn recently, 5% of the dwelling yield was to be dedicated to council, and that was provided for in the DA. So there is an established affordable housing mechanism that was considered for the site at the time the planning controls were prepared, and that's set out in the plan finalisation report prepared by the Department of Planning, where they make reference to council's 2013 affordable housing provisions. So that is what I discussed with council officers this morning in terms of how affordable housing will be provided on this site in future once it is redeveloped.
But I guess from our perspective, being that we have to make a determination of this application, I guess the point I'm trying to raise is that there's nothing before us in terms of from the applicant, because this application is a demolition of residential buildings, regardless of what is actually going to happen potentially in the future. But there's nothing before us to have made an assessment of the relevant provision to potentially come to a view of either A, B or C. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to raise. I'm not saying what the outcome of that assessment might be, but what I'm saying at this point of time, there isn't an assessment before the panel which deals with that issue.
Yeah, you are correct that each dwelling has not been assessed as to what its market rental was, where that sits in respect of medium rental incomes, other than advising the panel that the provision of affordable housing on a site is otherwise covered in a planning agreement registered on title, and we've provided council officers this morning with material on the conditions of the building themselves.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'll just go back to your request about the conditions becoming operational. But it does seem that the demolition plan would be a prerequisite before you do the demolition. Why would you object to that being a deferred commencement?
I mean, only in respect of it can still be enforced by council. It's still a condition. It's still a approval that would be granted subject to a condition that could still be given its full force, whether or not it was operational or deferred. It is simply, in my view, a matter that would otherwise be operational, and I accept again that lack of a checkpoint that otherwise exists in the majority of DAs where you have a construction certificate. But even in the absence of that, it is our contention that there could still be given force. The applicant would obviously still comply with all the conditions on it, and that there is significant enforcement powers available to council if that demolition plan wasn't prepared and demolition commenced.
But I'm just looking at them. They're things that you'd have to do, and to my mind, they would not be onerous, you know, in terms of a traffic and parking management plan for demolition, etc. At the end of the day, it's not like we have any CCs or a PCA that ticks these things off as having been done before you walk onto the site and start demolishing. So I just can't see how it's really onerous, and it's not like council's going to go down there every day and see what you've done. It's really to provide that certainty that these are matters that need to be done. And for example, dilapidation surveys. There's no other check and balance within the system when you just apply for demolition as opposed to construction.
Yeah, and I suppose our predominant request, Madam Chair, is that this be looked at through the panel providing a sensible and workable consent. Our first reaction to this is a 20-odd conditions with a 6-month time frame.
Well, no, we won't tie you to a 6-month time frame. But it just seems that there's no other opportunity to understand. For example, often you require a demolition, or you require a plan that provides at least the condition of other buildings that may surround or whatever. I'm not saying that happens here, but I just can't see how these are really onerous.
So look, this, as we've said, this is, in my view, that these could be operational if we are given sufficient time to do this. Then we will work through whatever conditions are given. I just ask that this panel consider whether these truly need to be a deferred matter or not, or whether they could live within operational conditions of consent, like the majority would. That's all we ask.
Well, as I say, this is a rather unusual situation, but we'll take on board what your submission has been, and we'll be making a decision. It'll be on the website by Monday afternoon. Thank you. Thank you, Frederick. Great.
Thank you. Bye.
We'll now move on to item number 5, which is 201 Miller Street, North Sydney. And this is the replacement of the existing window shrouds and repairs and maintenance to the facade of 23 23-storey commercial building and heritage listed item at the subject site. And I have registered to speak from the applicant. I don't have any written submissions, but I do have Abigail Cohen from LaSalle. Is she here, Abigail?
Yes, I'm here.
Yep.
You are?
Yes.
Right. I can't see you.
Can't hear you.
I believe you. We can't hear you very well.
I'm here.
Right, Abigail, yes. Nick Sysons.
Yep, he's just joining now.
He's just joining now, and Matthew Bailey from LaSalle as well.
Yep.
Yes, I'm here.
Right, okay then, thank you. So I'm in your hands as to how you all wish to present to the panel. So do you wish to start off, Abigail?
I think I'll
Matthew will
go.
address.
I'll go first. I'll be the only one speaking.
Okay.
So thanks for your time. So I represent the applicant.
Matthew Bailey. Matthew Bailey.
Sorry.
I can
Yes,
see you.
Matthew Bailey. Sorry.
Yep. Are
Yes,
you
so
there?
Matthew Bailey. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can I see you?
No, sorry. I'm just at an airport. We're running a bit behind time, so I can try and put my camera on if that helps.
Don't worry, that's okay.
Okay. Look, just firstly as background, I'd just like to point out the application here is driven by improving the compliance of the building. This is an application which, as most sort of development applications are, most development applications are driven by trying to make a developer a whole lot of money. This is actually the opposite of that. It's in fact costing us a lot, but we're just trying to improve the compliance of the building. It's been a very complex project balancing the requirements of the current building code with the heritage requirements. So that's been quite complicated. So we appreciate council's patience in this matter. We're happy with the deferral, but we do have a couple of comments around the conditions around that. The first one relates to the requirement that the original orange colour be reinstated. We're very limited in the materials that we can use to comply with current building codes that can match the shape of the original pods to meet the heritage requirements. And we're concerned that putting the same colour on a different material, for example, reinforced concrete, will have a very different effect to what is intended. We're also mindful that while we see the heritage value of the original orange colour, that's highly polarising. And from a general public and a user experience, we think that other options that are sympathetic to the heritage, but reconsidered in a more modern way, could be considered as part of a resubmission. The second issue we have is with the requirement that we remove the awning at the bottom of the building. We do agree that it wasn't a high quality addition to the building, but it does serve a purpose. And we think that it's unreasonable to require works of that scale to be done as a condition of consent when those works aren't a part of that application. And we just think that's unreasonable. So that's our view, and we're open for questions, but we thank you for your consideration.
So I suppose my first question is, this is a heritage listed building. So I'm just wondering what heritage would be left if the application was approved in the format submitted.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I mean, Nick's the architect. You can jump in here, Nick. I mean, the reality is probably very little, to be honest. The issue is the original pods were made out of fiberglass. We believe that they are, flammable, and that has issues with fire compliance and insurance. So, like I said, we're trying to balance the requirements with heritage. So, look, it's tough. Like it would be our preference not to remove them, but we've also got to balance up these other requirements of building safety.
But isn't the pods which you're looking at putting in replicating what's there? They're different.
Yeah, correct. We're trying to replicate what's there as closely as we can. However, the pods are sort of curved in 3 different directions. So trying to replicate it exactly with compliant materials, it can't be done in one piece out of aluminium. We have structural issues with doing it out of GRC. So this is sort of the issues we're trying to deal with. The only thing that we've found that you can exactly mimic the view, the look with, is out of fiberglass, which again wouldn't comply with current building code. So this is the challenges we're dealing with.
Yeah, I could jump in here. It's Nick Sissons, the architect. Hello, everyone. The existing building is very compromised in terms of its heritage presentation at the moment. The building was given an extreme makeover during the 80s and 90s, which really applied a number of postmodern additions to the top of the building, the color of the cowls, the whole of the lobby downstairs was redone. All of the columns were reshaped to postmodern shapes, which are kind of hollow and don't have any real intrinsic value. So it's really a highly compromised heritage building as it stands. And as Matt just said, that the cowls are a key feature of, I guess, the remaining heritage portion of the building. But given that they've come to the end of their serviceable life and their materials have some challenges, we now have to use different materials, but we are looking to replicate the cowls as a feature of the building as much as possible, but really bring it up into, I guess, a more modern version. And I guess the best example of that would be, say, for instance, the heritage of the AMP Centre, which was a difficult building as well to deal with, but the new beautiful white GRC cowls all the way up the AMP Centre down on Circular Quay, we think has really given that building a whole new lease on life. And I think the same opportunity really exists at 201 Miller.
Any other questions from the panel?
I just had a question that the heritage planner is of the view that the essential element of heritage about this building is the colour, the original colour from 1973 to when it was replaced in 1990, I believe. Can you go back to an orange colour with the materials that comply with today's building codes, fire safety issues, to replace rather than fiberglass?
It is. That is technically possible. The issue that we've got is the orange is a very strong colour, and the base of the building, the existing building, has been changed to a different dark grey, and there are other elements of the building which are now clad in natural stones. There's all sorts of things like marbles down there, and then there's that strange antenna system on the top as well. So it's a terrible clash and a terrible collision of what was a very beautifully integrated heritage building with what the situation is there now. So we felt that the white color was the best neutral, because the orange simply won't match what's there, and it will look like it would look like a terrible, terrible and bad compromise given the existing condition of the building. So the white is the most, I guess, neutral and the most has the most integrity. But the answer is yes, it could be orange if we wanted, but we think the result would not be good.
Okay, then, thank you all very much. Those observing and those who have made submissions to us will make our decision, and it'll be on the website by Monday, close of business. Thank you all. So we'll go to item 6, which is Unit 9, Wagadon Street, Neutral Bay. I'm sure you don't pronounce it that way. All right. Construction of yes, thank you very much. Semi-enclosed pergola replacement of balustrades, etc. Within an RFB, I have Anthony Solomon. Would you like to address this panel? And I have as observers Sibylla Masons as well, and Lawrence Field.
Yep. Laurie's online and Sibylla's in the office, but I'll just be brief because I know there's a big agenda, and this one's probably at the other end of the scale in terms of size compared to 201 Miller Street. Anyway, so this is an application for a barbecue and a pergola on an existing roof terrace in Wagden Road. Anyway, just briefly, the recommendation is for approval, and we don't really need to comment much further. There was just one sort of minor muddle up with the wording, which was from a previous incarnation. So anyway, the recommendation's for approval, so we'll go with that.
And you've seen the conditions and you've got no objection?
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Rightio, thank you very much, Anthony. And our decision will be on the website. It'll be no surprise. We don't have an issue. We haven't got any questions. Thanks very much, and thank you for waiting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very well. Item number 7 is 54A Cowdroy Avenue, Camaray, and alterations and additions to an existing 4-storey dwelling, and an internal lift, external staircase, pergola, etc. And we have Michael Fountain.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Yes, you've been waiting a very long time. Registered to speak, we have Min Wang.
Here.
Yes, thank you. And Michael, oh, well, yes. Min Wang is the owner, as I understand it. No? Oh, he's the neighbour? Yes.
No, I'm the neighbour, yes.
Yes. I can't see. Oh, okay. Right. And David Hunt.
Hello.
Thank you. And Nicole Lennon. And Jason Nye. So can I invite Min Wang to address the panel?
Thank you. I'm the like you said, I'm the owner of the I'm the owner of the house next door. I have no substantial objection to the development as the house as it is right now, except there are two residual issues, namely the pergola on top of the garage, but more importantly, the potential noise and vibration problem with the positioning of the proposed lift. But I'll turn it over to Mr. Fox from Michael Fountain Architect. He will be mainly speaking on my behalf. Thank you.
Okay then, thank you.
Thank you. Hugh Fox here from Michael Fountain Architects. We are generally happy with all the conditions as they've been written, but in particular in relation to the lift, there is one condition, condition number 19, where the council has put as part of the condition that they want a certificate from an appropriately qualified acoustic engineer to certify the vibration. Now, the clause just before that, clause 18, is a very similar condition, but it just doesn't include the wording where the council requires certification that the noise emanated from the lift, as heard from next door, is a condition. You know, the limit on that noise is a condition of the consent. And likewise, once you come down to the conditions for occupancy, there is a condition there which says prior to the issue of any occupation certificate, conditions C1, C2 and C3, they're kind of standard drawings need to be updated type conditions. But we would like the condition 18 and 19, that is the check that the lift isn't too noisy and doesn't vibrate too much, are also a condition of occupancy of the occupancy certificate to be included in the conditions. And that's the end of our submission.
Right, very well. And perhaps you could just say what the reason for that, the timing, or?
Well, these are essentially they are, you know, the condition 19 is a well-drafted condition that includes a control over the vibration emanated by the lift, and you know that's the primary concern of our client, the neighbour. But condition 18 also notes that a lift can be noisy as well, and so there are some specifications on what the level of noise should be heard above ambient noise in the neighbour's property. And all we're asking is that a similar condition as we find on condition 19 is applied to condition 18, where a certification is made as part of the the requirement there, that there's actually an engineering certificate saying this lift, as designed, is designed to not create a noise level above 5 dBA above ambient. And then we just want to, before occupancy, we want that condition to be confirmed that it is actually in situ, as built, conforms to the requirements.
Okay, yes.
Sorry, are you talking about construction, C18 and C19?
Yes, C18 and C19.
They're construction.
They're construction.
Yeah, they're construction noise.
But he's wanting the certified engineering about the noise and vibrancy to be prior to occupation.
For the lift.
Because the lift is is adjacent to the party wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what you're wanting in C8, 17 and 19 is before the issue of construction certificate.
That's correct. So the wording that we're asking in that in C18 to add is a certificate from an appropriate qualified acoustic consultant eligible for membership of the Association of Australian Acoustic Consultants must be submitted to the principal certifier, certifying that all plant and equipment on the site, together with the proposed plant and equipment operating contemporaneously, will comply with the requirements of this condition. And the requirements of the condition are set out, are acceptable in the actual standard condition. Now, that sentence that I've just said is in clause 19. Okay, so that condition regarding vibration is in clause 19.
Yep. Okay. All right then. Thank you. And representing the applicant, we have David Hunt as the architect. Is there any other submitters that wish to address the panel online? No? They're all for the applicant's team. Okay, so David Hunt, do you wish to address the panel?
No, I don't have anything to add at this point.
And Nicole Lennon, nothing to add?
Yes, I have something to add. So I'll take my time, if that's okay, if I start now. I'm obviously...
You an objector or you?
No, I'm the town planner. And I'm engaged by Jason Lee for the application.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just wanted to pass on that Mr. Lee is satisfied with the officer's recommendation, save for one of the conditions, and that is C1A, which requires further obscure glazing to the balustrading at the northern end of the west-facing balcony. I just wanted to emphasise that the balcony already exists, and it exists with clear glazing. And this application is merely modernising the balcony and reducing some of the bulky concrete at its base. And therefore, the situation as proposed is improved in terms of amenity to the neighbour by the proposed obscure glass elements along the two panels. The third section, as proposed with the clear glazing. Sorry?
Yes, go on.
Oh, sorry, I thought someone was interrupting. The third section, as proposed, provides a balanced outcome, because I note if you look at the LEP objective, it includes visual privacy and view sharing. So what we are trying to do is improve the current situation from an existing balcony to improve the amenity to the neighbour and improve privacy and limit cross view. But we are seeking that my client still obtain some views, some very important views across the marina and the bay to the northwest, and specifically from his dining room area. I note the various building placements in this precinct and direct locality, and it is commonly accepted that there is some cross views obtained in waterfront situations. I note that the pool and the pool edge is basically behind this panel, that council is suggesting a further condition, and it would require people on site to look back towards the pool. I also note that there's existing vegetation in place that densely screens any cross views in this situation. And the court, in terms of privacy, doesn't like to rely on landscape plans that offer vegetation, but when the vegetation is already there, it should be taken into consideration. I also note that the northern extent of this pool that we're concerned about is just the coping edge of the pool. It's not a deck where people sunbathe or entertain or congregate. So I really think that this addition of the further glazing is not required.
Thank you very much. We were there on site this morning, so we could view for ourselves the situation.
That's good. I'm glad you could. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well. We'll make our decision. It'll be on the website by close of business Monday. Thank you all. Now, land adjoining 306 Military Road, Cremorne is item number 8. And I have a number of people who wish to make submissions, and I will first of all do a roll call. Lawrence Mather. No. Stephen Henke. And which one's this from? No.
Item 8.
Item 8. Ian Curdy. No. Barbara Dutton. No. Harrison Bennett Precinct. No, these are 7 written submissions, sorry. Brightmoor Precinct and Jane Staley. And I only have John Wynne registered to speak. So, John, you've read the report and you can address the panel on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So John Wynne, Director of Planning at Urbis, representing the applicant, JC Deco. The panel will be aware there's actually 4 items, being item 8, 9, 11 and 12. I'm in your hands as to whether you want to go through them individually or collectively, but perhaps I present it this way. So as the panel be aware, these matters were deferred from the September panel meeting at our request to enable us to provide some additional information to the council regarding and to the panel as well about the context of the applications and some of the details of the applications. And we submitted that information fairly promptly after the panel meeting. Those matters have now been considered in the updated officers' assessments, and which has resulted in items 8, 9 and 11 being recommended for approval with conditions, and item 12 being recommended for refusal. Madam Chair and panel, our position is we accept these recommendations and the associated conditions. We think the officers have given proper consideration to the matters that we've submitted in addition to this, which we think were helpful to inform the assessments. And as Madam Chair, you probably the only one who was at the previous panel meeting is aware there's a series of applications being made by JC Deco in North Sydney Council as part of a contract with the council. So this is the beginning of some other applications. So we felt it was important to get it right at this first assessment and determination, and we're satisfied that that's been done. So we're happy with the recommendations that have been put forward and the conditions on those 4 items.
Okay, well, while we've got you there, John, we might just the Military Road, Cremorne, the one next to McDonald's.
Yeah, well, actually, before we look at it specifically, I noticed in terms of the package you've provided, there was a document prepared which is titled the North Sydney Council Street Furniture Development Plan. It's dated October 2023.
Yep.
I think it's the third page, which is the council. It's heading North Sydney Council Tender for Outdoor Advertising and Street Furniture. The second dot point in that on the right-hand side of that column talks about the dedication of 5% of digital content space on all advertising assets, including free graphic design, etc. I'm trying to understand the 5% of digital content. How is that working? Because there's images we've seen which shows obviously the general advertising on one side, but then there's a community, I guess, image or display, which as I understand is touchscreen on the other. But I'm trying to understand, is that permanently the community image is permanently there, or is that different to the 5%? I'm just trying to understand it.
I might just ask Jocelyn Morford, who is the JC Deco representative. She's online as well to specifically answer that question.
Thank you.
Yes, you're on mute. Sorry, you're on mute.
No, still can't hear you.
We talk about the other one while she tries to.
Hello? Okay.
I got you now.
Here we go. Yeah.
Got you. Jocelyn, we can hear you now.
Jocelyn, it's your turn to go.
She can't hear us now, clearly.
Jocelyn, we can't hear you.
She can't hear us now.
Mm.
Right. Modern technology.
Can you hear us, Jocelyn?
Can you hear us, John?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Jocelyn, just say you can hear us, wave your hand if you can.
Hang on, she's got a message there.
Is there other questions we can address? Oh, there she goes. She's putting in the chat.
Oh, no, we can't have a chatting. Tell her to go out and come back in.
Or turn the camera off.
Anyone able to see the chat?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Fire away.
I can't hear you now.
You talk.
Can I suggest that you go out and come back in, Jocelyn? Can we chat that back to her, please, Peter? Yeah. Okay, and John, we'll just continue with our discussion on Military Road Cremorne 1.
Sure. Was there a specific?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. My apologies. Did that message make sense?
Can you explain it?
No, can you explain? Yeah, can you explain it?
Yeah, I can explain it. So the live touch panel is permanently, the small screen on the back is permanently dedicated to council, and we work with council's marketing team to promote events and all sorts of activities, connections to libraries, all sorts of services that council offers. On the larger screen, the 5%, so our digital screens are 24/7. 5% of time is dedicated to council as stipulated in the contract. So in a day, that's 5% of 24 hours. I'm not a mathematician, so unfortunately I can't break that down to minutes on the spot here for you, but essentially throughout the day, that ad would appear. So our ads appear every 1 in 6, and it would be 5% of that 1 in 6, it would appear in a minute. So the content and the services just means that we don't give that content time away. We're conscious that not all organizations use that when we give it to them. So by offering our graphic design services means we can work with council and their marketing team to help create that content, to help ensure that the council and the community get the benefit of that 5% of time, which is revenue that we've taken away from ourselves and given directly to council to expose them and the community to the key messages that they wish to share.
So if I understand what you're saying, so you basically say on that particular side, it rolls. So unless you happen to be there when that image rolls up, then it doesn't function as a touch screen. Is that what you're saying?
On the large screen, no. On the small, yes. Sorry, on the smaller screen, it's 100% a touch screen dedicated to council content.
So one side will be 100%, and then the other side just has a rolling thing. Okay, that's fine. That's clear. Okay, thank you.
And another question on the same thing. Is there a need to limit it to such a small part of that particular side?
Can you rephrase the question? Sorry. So
the side for the community communication is rather small. Apropos the size for advertising, why can't it be a larger portion of the screen?
No, that's a fair question. Look, it worked with council's commercial team as we were developing it. It could become a larger screen if it was absolutely required. There physically isn't a limitation. It was more about council's preferences from a commercial perspective.
Okay, right. So have you made any approaches to the relevant community section of council to see what form of advertising they may wish you to include?
Personally, I haven't, but I'm sure our team has, and I can relay that if it's necessary for the purpose of the DA. But it's a part of the ongoing contractual relationship with council. Our commercial managers meet with them quarterly to discuss the effectiveness of the contract, the key outcomes, and to make sure that we're meeting all of the requirements, such as this 5% and such as the community information screen.
Does anyone have any questions on the Military Road one?
Oh, I just wanted to ask Jocelyn whether the community information sign is on the front elevation or the back elevation, or they change, or how does normally what would be on the rear elevation facing away from the traffic as opposed to the front elevation?
It's a good question. It depends. It depends site to site. In some instances, there's definitely the elevation is definitely the community, the advertising screen might face the traffic, but it might be deemed that that's also the better side for the community information panel to face. Obviously, there's a commercial imperative of our signs, and that is that we're trying to attract a patronage to view the visibility of the advertisements that were taking place. But in selecting each site, we're very cognizant of what is the best outcome, both for the community live touch panel being interacted with the community, but also for the advertising face and the revenue stream that creates for ourselves and council.
Okay. So can we were out on site today, and we saw the signs, or saw the proposed location of signs, and the Military Road one did raise some concerns with us in terms of the proliferation of signage in and about the area, and we just thought we'd flag that with you.
That signage is not about other signage. It's about the fact that there's a lot of street signs. You've got a left lane ends and asking you to merge, which is obviously where the proposed sign's going. And Transport New South Wales have said that should be relocated. Now, my view, that can only be relocated closer to the intersection or more in the proximity of the McDonald's frontage. But when you look at in front of the McDonald's frontage, there's also existing school zones, and there's also another sign which actually deals with the lane ending at 100 metres further up, the bus lane. So there's a concern that the relocation of that left lane ends, and with the two driveways occurring, there seems to be a lot of things happening from a traffic management point of view for vehicles driving, having to concentrate on making traffic decisions. And then all of a sudden we've got this advertising sign there, which is obviously, showing, advertisements. So there's concern about whether it's all too busy and whether that's a suitable location.
Yeah, perhaps I can respond to that one initially. Is that every one of these sites is selected having regard to traffic and pedestrian safety and consideration. So a full assessment is carried out by traffic consultants regarding the location of the sign, the relationship to other signs, traffic signals, traffic signs, bus lanes, and so forth. So this has been informed by that analysis, and that information has been submitted with the application, and that didn't raise any specific concerns about this location. For the other panel members who weren't at the previous meeting, these sites are selected very carefully, having regard to planning, traffic, pedestrian, landscaping considerations, and that issue has not been identified as a concern in this matter. From a JCD point of view, they've got a degree of flexibility around how these signs are cited, but I have to say in this case that hasn't been raised from our point of view, and that's really I don't know if it's been raised by any formal technical assessment, but and we think there's appropriate conditions of consent around management of the sign and to restrict any potential traffic impact. So we don't think it's an issue that is of such substance that warrants anything that it hasn't been considered, but I just want to reassure the panel that is a key matter for consideration in every application we've put in.
I suppose also, John, we measured it out, and we do note that the footpath would be narrowed, and Military Road is a major thoroughfare, just like the Pacific Highway, if not more so, and the footpath really would not be of an adequate width with the signage there.
Well, again, that is always assessed with every application. Both the required standards for pedestrian pathways and footpaths, offsets of curbs and so forth. Again, this exceeds those requirements. There's no doubt that it is a new structure there, so it does create another element in the streetscape. That's undeniable. But from the point of view of satisfying requirements, this does satisfy those, as all these applications do, and they've all been evaluated that way. So, we're cognizant of those issues, and this is particular locations that are fairly wide part of that local area. It's not a particularly constrained footpath compared to other locations, so we're confident that it's appropriate, but
that's okay. We're bound by the Act to also do a merit assessment. It's not just as if we do a tick and flick, so to speak.
Sure.
We have to have regard to the actual merits of the situation. No, that's fine. Okay, let's move on to 476 Villa Street, Camaray. We had a look at that one, and I think there's been a requirement by the council that it be 1.6 from the centre of the tree, which could be accommodated.
Yes.
And we'll also line up with the masonry portion of the fascia off the window next to the laneway.
Sure.
So that's that.
Yep.
All those.
Yep, we understand that.
Yeah. And then we move to Pacific High. Oh no, that's the wrong one. We now move to 11 Berry Street.
You want to do the other one? The
Mount Street?
Mount Street.
No.
Berry Street.
No, Mount Street's a G. Sorry.
No.
Berry Street.
Yeah. No, we'll go to Berry Street. So Berry Street. Yeah. Go, and no, we don't need to make any comments unless you would wish to on the other one as well, Mount Street.
No, the only comment on Mount Street is that, as you will see from the information submitted, JCD's in a contract with the council. It's not seeking to fight with council over these sites. I think we will review that location to see if there is a better location for something. We'll do that in consultation with the council through a pre-lodgement process. But we're not going to contest that recommendation at this point.
Okay, rightio. So just in terms of your process, it might assist you. Can we just suggest you go to Transport for New South Wales and to discuss the applications? I know you've got another swathe of them coming through. I think when we deferred it was to allow you to put in all the applications so that they could be assessed as a totality package. But nonetheless, that hasn't happened. But it seems to me that you would benefit by having discussions with Transport for New South Wales before you then even come to the council.
Yeah, we do. We have JCB has a municipal citywide association with them and does discuss all these applications as much as you can in pre-lodgement with Transport. But there is a positive engagement with Transport. Some of the other applications that are in the system, we're having continuing discussions with Transport because of either concurrent issues or referral issues they're raising. So there are matters that are afoot on all of those, but we hear what you say, and we try to engage with all stakeholders at the key level, agency level, particularly pre-lodgement for sure.
Right. Okay, then we can just from our experience today look at the merits of it, and not just that it complies with all of the numerics. That's important in terms of these applications, and also in terms of the public accepting them. So, yep.
Sure.
Okay then. Right here. Well, thank you both for coming today, and we'll put our decisions on the website Monday afternoon. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
So let's move now to item number 10, which is Shop 7599 Pacific Highway, St Leonard's. And this is change of use of premises to an indoor recreation facility. That is a gym. And we do have registered to speak Charles Pillay.
No, yeah.
Is there anybody there?
And we had one written submission also from the Owners Corporation for 599. And Charles Pillay was also representing the owners of the Strata Corporation. Yep, very well. Unfortunately, you're not here, but you can be assured that we will read your written submission. And with that, I will close the public meeting. This has been a public meeting today because of many of the items had numerous objections. I think one had, I won't say how many, but a lot of objections. And so we have continued the whole meeting in the public session. So we will sign off the meeting at 5 minutes past 5. Thank you.